Today's guest is Dr. Donald Molnar. Dr. Molnar is an internal medicine hospital-based physician who is also interested in looking for evidence of the afterlife. He is often present at the passing of patients as well as leading code blue events where essentially a patient is dead and needs to be revived. He notes otherworldly occurrences during these happenings, and today we're going to talk about those as well as his 12 parts of a near-death experience. Dr. Molnar, thank you so much for giving me some of your time today, and welcome.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, let's get right to it. Can we start with you giving us some examples of some of the otherworldly things you've seen while patients were passing?
Sure thing. So, as internal medicine doc, we end up having to provide a lot of comfort care. Comfort care is end-of-life care where you're just kind of focusing on making sure people aren't suffering anymore, and you kind of stop doing all the traditional medical care and basically just let people pass, have the family come see them and all those kind of things. And one of the situations that really always is very vivid in my memory is I had an older lady. We had decided to go ahead and make her comfort care, and she didn't actually have, I don't think her family could come in. So we were checking on her pretty regularly because she was by herself, and we had made her comfort care. I went in to check on her, and I walk in the room, and she's looking up at the ceiling, and she has these, her eyes are just like sparkling, and she has this big smile. Now you got to remember, this is before I was doing what I do now with all the paranormal stuff and parapsychology and all that. I mean, I was always interested in it, but I wasn't into it like I am now. So, but I just had to ask her because she was she was definitely seeing something that wasn't there. And I asked her, I'm like, what are you seeing? And she's like, don't you see those angels? And I'm like, I actually looked up. I'm like, I don't see them, but I'll believe you. And she goes, yeah, they're right there and they're coming to get me. And I'm like, they are? And I was like, okay. And then that nurse came in, and she was kind of amazed by the whole thing too. And me and the nurse walked out, and I told the nurse, I'm like, I think she's going to pass pretty soon. Because I had heard that, people, when they start, seeing angels or things like that, and hear that they're close to death. So probably an hour or 2 hours after that whole experience, she ended up passing away. And, I know skeptical people would say, well, what about oxygen and medications and all these things? And in all honesty, she really hadn't received much medication. She didn't really complain much, and, just kind of faded away. We weren't checking her vitals, but she didn't have that impression of, blue lips and all this kind of stuff. She just laying there smiling and was seeing angels. So that was, to me, that pretty powerful now that I'm doing what I do with looking, for signs of the afterlife and all that. So that was one of the experiences. You want me to tell you some more? Do you got any questions on that one?
Yeah, I'd like to hear some more.
So this actually happened recently, where I'm working now. About a month or so ago, we decided to make a lady comfort care. And even though it was COVID, once we make somebody comfort care, we let the family come in. For the most part, we were keeping the family out because we're kind of a long-term, like acute care place. So we still take care of pretty sick people, but we make sure we weren't letting visitors in at the height of COVID. So during this time, we had actually let her grandson come in, and we decided to make her comfort care, and he was staying around the clock, either him or the granddaughter. And I came down to check on her, and she wasn't very responsive to me, but I asked him, like, out of curiosity, has she said anything? Has she woke up? Has she, commented about anything? He goes, well, about an hour or so ago, she was talking to her sister who had died, and then I think one of her kids who had died, and it seemed like she was really, really talking to them. so I'm like, well, I believe it. And then she ended up passing away, I think, within a few hours of that too. So I didn't actually witness that myself, but that was the story that the grandson had told me and all that. So he was like a little bit taken back by it. You could tell he was a little bit rattled. He was like, yeah, she was seeing him and talking to him. So those are basically deathbed visions. People have these deathbed visions or deathbed experiences that they'll have right before they're going to die. And often they'll see either loved ones or religious figures. A lot of times, curiously, deceased loved ones will come with pets for whatever reason. They'll have the deceased dog or the deceased cat with them. And it seems to, help people move on to the afterlife is what we suspect.
I think you said that you're not always with them, but do you have any reports that when they do visit with these people, they're much more comfortable when they pass.
It seems like it, yeah. It seems like the experiences help the patient to do better. Often by the time, like for example, in this lady's situation, she was pretty out of it when she passed. So it's hard to tell. She definitely wasn't restless, or agitated or anything. So she seemed comfortable. The lady I told you the first story, she definitely was very at peace and passed peacefully. So it does seem to bring comfort. It also seems to help the families that are sitting at the bedside. It helps them to kind of know that maybe somebody that's already deceased is coming for them. So there's actually been some studies. I can't remember the names of them, but there's been some studies that there's a doc who's a hospice doc who's done some research and published a paper about the effects of these deathbed experiences on the patient and on the family. Then it does seem to help them. So the curious thing, since we're kind of talking about this, is sometimes the families will experience what the patient's experiencing. Now, I haven't seen this myself. I haven't witnessed it myself, but there's stories about like a shared deathbed experience. And there's been stories where, the loved one was sitting there and, the deceased husband or wife came and the family member actually witnessed that too, which is pretty incredible. So, like I said, I haven't personally seen that. Now, I do talk to some of the hospice nurses. We have a hospice unit as part of our hospital where I work, and they do say, it's really common to have these deathbed experiences. They haven't said much about these shared experiences, but, the hospice folks definitely seem to experience that. And nursing home staff seem to experience these deathbed experiences also. So,
is there anything that you've seen personally that rattled you?
Something that was not so much rattled me, but it was a little bit kind of startling and interesting. The doctors run the code blue. So a code blue happens when somebody's discovered not breathing or not having a pulse, they call it code blue. And that gets everybody to the room really fast. And they bring a cart full of medicines and different devices and things like that, things to put a tube in and things to shock people if we got a shock and all that. So anyways, the doctors run the code blue. So I was running this code blue and this person had been on dialysis and all of a sudden they lost their pulse and stopped breathing. And we had to start doing CPR and we did CPR and gave medications for about 15 minutes or so. I had my back to the wall and I just all of a sudden felt this rush of it was a combination of wind, static electricity, and just energy kind of go from behind me through me towards the patient. And at about that time, the patient, we got his pulse back and we got him back alive. It's easy to think, well, maybe that was just like a breeze blowing, but there wasn't any events around me. And it was just a different kind of thing. It wasn't just the wind. It was like this energy. And I couldn't help to think when you think about near-death experiences, people talk about this whoosh, like they were whooshed back into their body, and I'm like, I wonder if this guy's spirit just whooshed back into his body. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to talk to him because the hospital I work in is, like I said, a satellite hospital. So we kind of get him back and we send him to the big hospital for further evaluation and things like that. So I never really got a chance to talk with him, but it was pretty incredible. I think, it felt like his spirit rushed through me or past me back into him because right then and there he got his pulse back and then he slowly recovered consciousness after he got his blood pressure and all that kind of stuff back. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it sounds
pretty cool. Another interesting thing happened was during a comfort care situation. We were helping a person pass away, and we had called the family in, and the family was all there, and this person had been on a ventilator. So when you're on the ventilator, we do a thing called a terminal wean. Basically, it means you're taking a ventilator off to let them pass. So we had got all the family in there, started taking him off the ventilator, got him off the ventilator, and then he ultimately passed away. Right as he passed away, it was kind of that same sensation, like there was all of a sudden this cold chill in the room, and it kind of felt like this breeze was moving around the room, and you could kind of watch people's face. There was probably 5, 6 people in there standing around the bed, and you could kind of everybody see everybody kind of do a second take, and I felt it go past me. And I just kind of watched everybody else, and it was interesting. It kind of gave you the chills and a little bit of the creepy feeling. To me, I'm always really skeptical, but to me, it seemed like his spirit was moving around the room and kind of you felt this kind of energy, cold breeze kind of thing. And again, I don't think it was a ventilator. It wasn't a ventilation problem or air conditioning or anything like that. So that was kind of interesting again, where you could just kind of feel that sensation, and from doing the paranormal investigating, you kind of get used to these vibes and these sensations. You kind of feel the energy change in a room. And that's kind of what this felt like, this energy, but then this breeze kind of went around the room. So that was kind of interesting too, I thought.
So as you're doing your own personal research and studying this stuff, where do you think consciousness exists? Is it created by the brain, or is it something outside of the body, or what?
That's a good question. I think it's something I think our body's a shell for the consciousness. I think the consciousness comes into our bodies when we're born, and then it leaves when we die. And then, it seems like it's probably recycled. There's some reincarnation. There's several folks that have done some pretty good research in reincarnation. In fact, at University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies, they study near-death experiences, but there's Dr. Greisen studies near-death experiences, but there's a Dr. Tucker who does all this reincarnation of children, and he studies children with previous lives. So there's pretty compelling evidence and reports of people coming, of children having previous lives. They have all these amazing details. So it seems like our consciousness kind of comes into our bodies when we're born, and then it leaves when we die. And it seems like some of it's recycled. I don't know if everybody's recycled or only some people come back. But I think it's in our bodies, exactly in our bodies where, it's hard to say. Is it the third eye we all talk about? Is it, somewhere in the brain? Is it in our hearts? That kind of thing. But I think it's something outside of us. And it comes into our bodies for whatever reason until we pass on. Now, an interesting question that came up, somebody I was talking with, what happens if you put your body in suspended animation? Like if you freeze your body and you were to bring it back to life, do you get the same consciousness that you had, or the same soul that you had before? What happens to that soul? Does it wait forever for your body to come back? So kind of an interesting thought along this whole line of the body kind of being a shell for your consciousness. So
yeah, it definitely would put a whole new spin on Star Trek. If they beam you somewhere, does your consciousness follow your body?
I know, are we assigned to the body we have now, no matter what, even if it's like put into frozen, suspended animation or whatever. So
yeah, there's a lot of great questions. So was there a certain event in the hospital or anything that put you on this path of being so interested in the paranormal?
So I pretty much, all my life I've had strange things happen. You want me to go back? You want me to tell you? You want me to go way back?
Whatever you want.
So all my life, I know it sounds corny, right? Mm-hmm. I've had these weird experiences. My family was always really open to it. My father was kind of the Bigfoot, UFO, ghost kind of guy. My mom was a little more spiritual. She was more into like heaven and angels and things like that. So we always had an open forum to kind of talk about things. And we all, like my dad and myself, seemed to have a lot of different experiences and things like that. So I was always really open to it. And then it seems like all my life I've had weird things happen, to the point where I almost feel like I'm haunted, or maybe the ghosts just follow me around. Mm-hmm. But everywhere I go, it seems like there's some activity. So then, I became a doc in medical school and all that stuff, and just continue to believe, in it and all that stuff. And I started watching shows, came out, the Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and I'm like, holy cow, you can investigate this stuff. And then I ended up moving from Ohio to Virginia, where I live now. And there was a team in Virginia that was doing investigations that was really close to where I was at. So I ended up joining that team. I'm like, what? There's a team right here. So I joined this team and started the paranormal investigating. And then, I always knew about the near-death experiences and the deathbed visions, but I didn't know much. In probably around 2012 when I started doing all the ghost investigating. Around 2018, I decided to branch off and do this haunted MD project that I do. And that really opened a door for me to kind of realize there's so much more than just the ghost investigating. That's when I started really reading more about the near-death experiences and thinking about the experiences that I had, the deathbed visions, thinking about that lady I told you about and different experiences I've had. So I think all my life I've been open to it. And now I've just really decided to pursue it, more aggressively the last, 10 years or so, 9-10 years. Mm-hmm. So but then it constantly gets reinforced, with either paranormal investigating or having experiences in the hospital. It's one of the cool things is I talk to patients once I kind of build this relationship, and they'll we'll get to know each other pretty well. And I've had situations where people have passed away and their families will reach out to me and say, hey, ever since so-and-so passed away, our lights are flickering. We're having all these strange things happening. The birds are acting weird. And so it's really cool to kind of get this follow-up from patients and their families, or from their families, that there seems to be after death communication happening, where the loved ones are reaching out beyond the grave. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. Have you ever had a patient that you've brought back tell you that they had a near-death experience?
Not officially. And I haven't had a chance to really ask a lot of them, because where I'm at now, we end up sending them out. So you don't get to do that follow-up. We don't get so many codes now. I think when I did a lot of the code blues, I wasn't into it as much as I am now. So, and a lot of times the patients won't come forward. I got to kind of dig it out of them a little bit and kind of build a relationship. And I'll kind of say, hey, by the way, when you were on that life support machine and did anything happen? Now, I've had patients tell me. I had a guy who ended up having a neck injury and paralyzed, and he was sick for a long time, but he had a couple near-death experiences. His first one he had was he ended up leaving his body and, having to, kind of moving around the building kind of thing, and seeing, seeing the bright light and all that stuff, and then came back to his body. So I've had some patients that you're able to kind of get it out of them and talk with them. So unfortunately, when I was doing a lot of the codes, like I said, I wasn't into it as much. I wish I would have had I wish I would have thought about talking to folks more about it, then.
Yeah. I guess you could always say something like, man, you were gone for a while. Wonder what you were up to. Or
yeah. Where'd you go? The problem is, these
bring you back.
Well, the tricky thing is you got to remember, when you get these people back, they're usually pretty sick. I mean, they're usually going to the ICU. Like, they usually aren't talking very much. It's very rare to get somebody to code somebody, get them back, and then they're just back to living their life, right? It's like you code them. Sometimes you put a tube in, sometimes you don't. Usually it's they can't talk to you right away about things. So, and you end up losing track. As doctors, we'll shift them. Like if a patient codes on a floor in a hospital, you usually get them stabilized and send them to the MICU or an intensive care unit. Then you usually lose track of them, because often you'll change services, especially, even now as a doctor out of training, you go off duty, you're on duty. So you end up losing track of folks. As a resident, when training, you switch every month or every couple of weeks. So sometimes you lose track of these folks. Mm-hmm. And if you don't make an active effort to kind of go back and talk to them, you just never really get that opportunity. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of folks doing research, out there, they're tracking these folks down and kind of saying, hey, what happened when that happened? Mm-hmm. So I'd definitely be curious. That guy that I told you about, something had to happen with him. He had to be out of his body, because to me, that was something that went through me into him,
Yeah,
so
it sounds like it to me. I mean, it sounds like he went right through you.
Yeah. And I'm skeptical. I'm not easy to jump on. I'm like, I got to really convince myself that something paranormal happened. I'm like, if I can dismiss it, I'm not going to just say everything's paranormal. So I really got to convince myself. And that experience to me was something. I think his soul went back into him when we got him back. So.
What, in your opinion, has the pineal gland with anything metaphysical or spiritual, if it has anything that could, relate to that?
So I think with the pineal gland, the theory is, that some of the cells in the pineal gland are like the retina cells, like this. We have our retina in the back of our eyes, that's how we can see colors and black and white and all that kind of thing. So some of the cells that are in the pineal gland they're biologically similar to retinal cells. So that's kind of where we get this thought that, it's the third eye or our psychic eye. It's also what kind of controls our sleep cycles and stuff like that. So it responds to, light, daylight and darkness, through the effects through the daylight coming through our eyes or the darkness coming through our eyes affects the pineal gland. Now, kind of how this comes into play is the whole idea of DMT, and that DMT molecule supposedly is what leads to paranormal or spiritual experiences. The problem is with humans, they haven't been able to find it for sure in the pineal gland, and other animals like rodents and animals like that, they can find the DMT is actually in the pineal gland. So far in humans, we haven't been able to prove that, but people still kind of feel that the pineal gland is still this third eye or the center for our paranormal experiences and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of where all that comes from. And
I'm kind of feeling that the DMT doesn't really cause the near-death experience because, for one, when I had Dr. Van Lommel on, he said that DMT is only in the half-life of DMT in your body is only 1 second. So your body metabolizes. Right. It's pretty short. It metabolizes it very fast. And two is if you talk to people who do DMT recreationally, they have this amazing experience, but as soon as they get back, they forget it. Most of it, if not all of it.
Right.
They're not spiritually they're not spiritually transformed, and it's not something that they can't shake it. People who have NDEs quite often can't shake that memory. It's always with them. You know what I mean? It doesn't fade. Right. It's kind of the opposite of just taking the DMT.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think the pineal gland and DMT would explain a near-death experience, especially, when you look at near-death experience, there's all these, the 12 different phases. Hey, those 12 phases are from a guy named Jeffrey Long. They're from this book, Evidence for the Afterlife by Dr. Long. He kind of came up with those 12 steps that I've been talking about. But, one of the compelling things for a near-death experience being something besides like an hallucination or something produced by, the drugs or lack of oxygen, is like the out-of-body experience. There's a couple different things that kind of really make it seem like it's something real compared to a dreamlike state. The out-of-body experience, people leave their bodies and they're able to see details of things happening that they should have known. Or they see things like they took my dentures out of my mouth and they put it in that drawer over there, and they shouldn't have known that. And they go and look in there and there. There was another out-of-body experience. A lady talked about, she saw the tennis shoe on the roof of the building, on like a balcony roof of the building, and there's no way she would have known that. Yeah. And they actually found the shoe, and she described the shoe, like the color of it, how the shoelaces were and things like that. So having the out-of-body experience as part of a near-death experience, it's really hard to dismiss those kind of things that you can collect, that you can find evidence for. It's like, and then, other times people in their out-of-body experiences, they'll go in the waiting room, they'll travel out of where their body is, go to the waiting room and hear conversations by the family or by the nurses. And they're able to tell those people that, and the people are blown away. Like, how did you know we were talking about that? Right. So I think there's definitely something else going on with near-death experiences besides just, like a brain chemical or lack of oxygen or dreaming or something like that. So
yeah, it's interesting to me also is when you are with a deceased body and it's an intact body, you feel like, okay, the only thing that's missing is the spark of energy or something.
Yes.
You have the components there. It's just missing that, spark of life or something.
And that's a good point. It's funny you mentioned that, because I often think that and talk about that to other folks. Is you could tell something's gone. It's hard to put it into words, but once somebody passes, because there's times where you're there, or you got to come pronounce them dead. Anytime somebody dies in the hospital, we got to go pronounce them dead. So if we're not there at the time of death, we're there pretty close. But yeah, there's some energy that's gone, and to me, it seems to be more than just the blood pumping and the air breathing. You could just tell that the person that's dead is just a shell. It's just a shell. And, it's hard to scientifically record that, but there definitely seems to be something like what you're saying, that it's just, there's a spark or energy force that's just gone. And this always strikes me when I got to pronounce somebody dead, or when you're there when they actually pass. Well, like I said, when you actually pass, sometimes you do feel that you feel that energy go around the room. So
yeah, that's amazing. If you don't mind me asking you a personal question, do you fear death?
Sure. No, I don't. I don't. No.
Oh, that's good.
In fact, a couple of times I've almost died, but I haven't had near death experience. The closest thing I had was I got stuck underneath this raft. We were whitewater rafting in West Virginia, and we had gone to this place several years in a row, and we always did the hardest parts twice in a row. And it was actually on the Gully River in West Virginia, and you could do the double. So it was upper, middle, lower gully. You could do the double upper gully. The upper gully was the worst, had the worst rapids. So you do the double upper gully, and we had done that a bunch of times. We decided to do the upper and the middle gully. So you did the upper gully in the morning, and in the afternoon you did the middle gully river. And we hadn't done that before, and we were going down the river, so I didn't really know the rapids that well. So we got to this rapid. It was a little rapid, but what it did was it made the boat twist up on its side. So the boat went up on its side, but didn't flip all the way over. But I was on the downside in the front. So I got knocked into the water, got stepped on by other people that got in the water were stepping on me, pushing me down in the water. Then I came up underneath the boat. So the boat was upright. The raft was upright. I'm underneath the boat like this, and I couldn't get out from underneath it. And all I can remember is, before you get on the raft, they'll tell you, like, if you get stuck underneath the boat, just try to crawl like you're crawling on the floor. So that's what I was trying to do, but it was tricky because the raft was going down the river. I'm trying to get out from underneath this, and I was about to take my last breath. And I was like, I can't get out. I can't get out from underneath this thing. So I said, I don't know what to do. Do I just give up? Do I give it one more try? And right at that time, I had this amazing sense of peace. I didn't see anything, but I had this amazing sense of peace that if I just decided to give up, that it would be okay, that death wouldn't be so bad.
Wow.
But then I also had this feeling of, I got to give it one more try. But the thing that strikes me, even as I'm telling you this now, is I can feel that memory is, it is okay if I let go, that it's not going to be bad. But then I gave it one more try, and I got out from underneath the boat, and they pulled me back up there. But it was weird that the sense of peace was just like, it's okay either way. Yeah. That the death is, that if I can't make it, it's okay.
Wow, that's an amazing.
So that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's an amazing experience. It's like a mini NDE almost.
Yeah. So needless to say, I haven't gone rafting again. No more rafting.
When I was talking to Dr. Van Lummel, we were speaking about that you don't have to be clinically dead to have an NDE. You can be in situations that you're about to die or close to death or something, and that's you were almost there.
So that's what they call a near-death experience. You could either be officially dead for a little bit, or you may be really close to death. Like, you'll hear people tell stories like they were, on their last leg, and then they had an experience, and and then came back and recovered and all that stuff. But yeah, it's usually like a situation where most likely you're in a situation where you could die. It's that extreme where you're just minutes away from death kind of thing. Versus, and then also people are actually dead for a short period of time. So yeah, you don't have to be clinically dead to have the near death experience. Just, you can be pretty close to it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So after me interviewing so many people, I feel like there's generally two outcomes. I'm sure there's more, and not everybody fits in this box that I've kind of observed. But I see that you either, once you leave your body, you go to a place that's peaceful but black, and you may encounter someone or not, and then you come back. Or it may be an outcome that's more extreme, and you leave the black place into a tunnel and go to a place of light and probably encounter beings and then come back. Those are the two outcomes I generally see. Can you add to that, or can you give me what your take is on that?
I think that's pretty good, and that's a pretty good summary. The books I've been looking at is, some people talk about leaving the body, and when you talk about these 12 steps, there's the leaving the body, the out of body experience. You get these amazing sensory experience. You get the peace and love. Everything feels amazing love and happiness. Then you do the tunnel, then the light, then the beings, and so forth and so on. not everybody has all those steps. Some people just have the out of body experience, leave their body, see their body, go back in. Some people will leave their body and have the darkness, but not be afraid. They'll hear a voice and, maybe have a life review or something like that and go back. But there does kind of seem to be this, some folks go to a dark room where it's really quiet. Other people have this really vivid experience with the tunnel and the light and those kind of things. Some people just have, I left my body and came back. They didn't have any darkness. They just saw one of the patients I had talked to said he went out of his body, he saw what was going on, and then when he was back in his body, all of a sudden, so it can be just the out of body experience. It could be all the phases. It could be the darkness. The one thing to remember too is, I'm not sure the percentage, but not all NDEs are good experiences. Some people go to a really bad place and, have a really painful experience, based on whatever, had happened in their life. So I don't have the numbers on that. It's a little, I think the percentage is a lot lower for the people that have the negative near-death experience. But it could be a wide variety. Some people, may not have, or it seems like a lot of people have that out of body experience. I think it's like 74% folks that in the one study, the near death experience research foundation said about 70% of people have out of body, and then everything else is a little less. Some people may just have the life review. Some people may just hear the voice, go back. Some people may see, deceased loved ones and not have all the rest of the stuff. So it's kind of weird how it all kind of goes about. Although the out-of-body experience seems to be fairly common with the near-death experiences.
Since you are also into haunted stuff, what is your take on spirits being out of bodies and not reincarnating or coming back or going on, and they're still roaming around the earth, haunting places, or what we perceive as haunting? Maybe they're just hanging around. What do you think's going on there?
See, that's tricky. It kind of comes down to the idea of, you have residual hauntings, and then you have intelligent hauntings or interactive hauntings. The idea behind like a residual haunting is that's where something happened where the person passed away or whatever, and there was a negative energy there, and that just kind of keeps playing. It kind of imprints on the environment. It keeps playing over and over again. The same things happen where you can't really interact with it, it doesn't really change what it's doing. So that's kind of a residual thing that's thought to be like a VCR tape or a video that just keeps playing over and over again. And then the interactive ones are a little more curious because those seem to be ones that have an intelligence where they'll do different things at different times. You can get answers from them. If you're using EV, looking for electronic voice phenomena, you can get answers to questions. They may move things, or you'll see shadows run around. As far as why at a particular location, to me, it seems like when it comes to like intelligent interactive hauntings, I think they could come and go. I don't think they're necessarily stuck in a location. If you're talking about residual type energies, it seems like those just stay in that one spot. But if you believe that like an interactive intelligent haunting is our souls, is a soul of a person who's alive, which is, we think the soul and the consciousness are kind of equivalent, then it would stand to reason that the interactive spirits are probably the consciousness of somebody who's coming to that particular location to do what they're going to do and all that things. But I think those intelligent ones are more likely to come and go and travel around, and I don't think they're stuck in a particular spot. Now, it's hard to say. We don't know for sure. Yeah. But it seems to me that if you think that the intelligent spirits are the consciousness or the soul of a previous living person, that person or that consciousness must have left the body and had a death experience and left and went to the afterlife, but now they're able to come back. And there's this whole idea of that some souls or consciousness are able to cross over to the afterlife, and then some don't. And the ones that do cross over to the afterlife seem like they can kind of come back and forth. Then there's the other ones that are earthly bound kind of things that aren't necessarily residual, that for whatever reason don't cross over. They also seem to be interactive, and I'm not sure how to make sense of that. But it seems like the intelligent ones can kind of come and go, and they're not necessarily stuck in one place. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
I agree with you that I think, yeah, maybe some of them have learned to that have crossed over, learned to be able to come back and they can cross and back. I think some of them maybe, obviously this is all just guessing, speculation, but maybe some of them in shock of being dead and they're just confused and don't understand where they're at, what they're doing. And then some of them may have so much attachment to their family or loved ones or whatever that they choose not to go on. They still want to be with these people.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that.
Or maybe a place, like maybe that's why certain places, like if you have a haunted hotel or whatever, maybe like you were saying earlier, maybe they're somehow attached to this place, or maybe they're there and don't realize they're there. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you too that, yeah, it seems like some people or some spirits can't move on or don't want to move on, for whatever reason. And it's curious why that happens. But they seem to kind of stick around. So yeah, the other thing that's interesting along the same lines is I had a patient that they were driving in a car and their significant other got killed in the car. There was a car crash. Significant other got killed in a car crash and this person survived. And we started talking about this stuff because I was curious. I'm like, did anything happen at the car crash, or do you remember like the person's soul leaving their body at the time? And this person said no, they didn't really remember any of that. They did have a dream where the person came to them in their dream and said, "Hey, I'm okay. Don't worry about me," kind of thing. But what this patient asked me, he's like, well, I don't know why this person doesn't come visit me more, because they were really in love and really attached. It was, they were living together and had a bright future together. And, they were like, well, why doesn't this person come visit me or give me more signs? And I said, I don't know. I said, I think, they may be giving you signs and they're real subtle, or maybe there's other things going on that are preventing them from doing that. But then there's other stories you hear where deceased loved ones start reaching out right away. As soon as they passed away, the lights are acting strange and all these other things. So it's kind of curious about what is it about one person who passes who can automatically start interacting versus somebody who doesn't seem to give any signs of their presence. So that's an interesting kind of thing too. I guess probably along the same lines of with this, why are some spirits where they're at and more interactive than others? So it's a curious thing to think about.
I don't know. My only guess would be is, from what some of the experiences that I hear people tell me, the place is so amazing and there's so much love there, so much immeasurable love, and they're so loved that you can't compare it to here, and they lose all interest of here. And so
right. That's a good point.
That's a good point. What can you tell the person? Hey, I'm sorry, but the place is too amazing over there.
It's like with near-death experiences, people have these amazing experiences of, the amazing love, your senses are heightened, you see like you never see, you hear like you never hear, you feel like you never feel, you may see your deceased loved ones. That a lot of folks get mad that they had to come back to their bodies because, with the near-death experiences, there seems to be a thing, you either get to a boundary or a barrier, or somebody tells you need to go back, or you got to make a decision. So you either get a voluntary or an involuntary chance to go back. And a lot of folks go back and they're like, I was mad. I didn't want to come back. So you may be right that even though this person loved the other person so much, they're so happy where they're at right now that they don't really think about coming back to visit.
Yeah.
So I ended up telling this person, I said, you just never know. I said, sometimes it takes time, and I'm sure just if you pay attention, you'll see things. And sometimes they're subtle. I've talked to different folks that have had, they call it after death communication with the birds and the coins and the electronics and all that kind of stuff, that sometimes it's really subtle. Sometimes for whatever reason, it might be little things you don't think about that person's reaching out from beyond to give you a sign. So, but.
What about near-death experiences inspires you the most?
I think it's amazing that it happens. And I think if you truly believe that it's happening, then that's your answer, that there's an afterlife, that there's something beyond us. I think the thing with near-death experiences too is that there's so much evidence that's building up and so much research being done that it's really hard to deny anymore, unless you're just going to be a really hardcore skeptic and just say, no way. I think it's, something that you can kind of wrap your head around, and you can kind of get, story after story after story, and you can characterize all the different steps of the near-death experience. It's something that you can really, kind of grasp versus, just seeing a ghost or, hearing noises or something like that. I think that the reproducibility of what happens and the people's stories are pretty compelling, and now more than ever before, there's so much research out there from different people, like even the University of Virginia Department of Perceptual Studies, Dr. Bruce Greisen, they've done a ton of research, on these, and and the interesting thing is all these folks that are researching around the world, in the United States and, around the world, they're getting similar data, so when you start putting all these studies together, it's kind of hard to deny that there isn't something going on. So I think for me, that's as a science-based guy, when you can say, hey, here's the research, here's the study after study saying that these things are happening, and you really can't account for them by natural reasons like lack of oxygen, or it's just a dream, or it's the medications or something else going on. I think the other thing interesting about near-death experiences is, like you can verify some of this stuff, like out-of-body experiences. People come back with information that they shouldn't have. When you look at different age groups, kids, young kids, older kids, young adults, older adults, everybody's having the same experience. When you look across cultures and religions, no matter what culture or religion, they're having the same kind of similar experiences. So I think you really got to stop and look and say, hey, something's going on here. It's not just, some mumbo jumbo happening, or it's not just the brain chemistry when we die. So I think that's pretty compelling to me.
What's the most compelling research that you've seen about it?
I think this book I was reading, I keep showing you, this evidence of the afterlife by Jeff Young. There's a website called the Near Death Experience Research Foundation, NDEFR, and you can actually submit your near-death experiences there, but they also do research off of that. So they've done the most intense research on it. I think they looked at something like 1,300 cases and all that. So that's, when you go through this book and look through the way they put it together, and they concluded that there's 9 sets of data based on their research from gathering all these studies that are pretty compelling. The other thing that's interesting with near-death experiences is that blind people that have never seen all their life, will have out-of-body experiences, and they can see, and they don't know what to do. They're like, oh my God, I can see now. So I think there's that's one of the points of evidence, is that, people that are blind are having these out-of-body experiences and seeing things. The kids are seeing it. These out-of-body experiences can be verified. When you're out of your body, or you're having this, your consciousness and your awakeness, if you will, is much more pronounced than when you're alive. So, if it's a effect of dying, usually when somebody's got low oxygen or they're actively dying, they're really confused and disoriented and things like that. So the fact that their consciousness is even more pronounced than when they were alive is pretty compelling. So, but the research to check out is this near-death experience research foundation study by Jeff Long. And I know Dr. Bruce Greisen has a book out called Wake. I think it's Awake or Wake. It's another good book about, and there's actually some other books too. Raymond Mooney, Life After Life. And then there's another handbook of near-death experiences is a compilation of a bunch of things. So those are the books I use right now, and a lot of compelling evidence out there for it. I think it's real.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what is your percentage of certainty that it's real for you personally? If you can give.
Well, I think with anything paranormal, I always got a little bit of doubt, right?
Yeah, sure.
But I'd say 99%, 99.9%.
Right. That's great. I mean, I asked Dr. Van Lemmel basically the same question, and I think he said, we can't prove it, but I wish I could remember the exact words. I need to go back to my own podcast and remember and look what he said. But it was something like, we can't prove it, but it's beyond reasonable a doubt that it's happening.
Yes. And that's a tricky thing, because if I put my skeptical hat on, right, if I'm going to come at it from a hardcore science base, it's hard to exclude completely that it's not some kind of catecholamine rush or adrenaline rush, and it's hard to say, well, why isn't this the body's last chance to kind of stop death from happening? And that's because you're getting this rush of hormones and things. That's why you're having these amazing experiences, So you could, as a skeptic, you could sit back and say that, but I think when you look at the stories and the things that can be verified that people should know, and how they're similar across the world and all those things, I think it's hard to dismiss it. But yeah, it's one of those things, there's just enough room that people can have doubt, about it. But yeah.
Do you talk about this at work at all? Or is this something that you don't mention?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, we talk about, actually, all the paranormal stuff. A lot of my colleagues will come up to me and they'll talk about even the ghost stuff. We'll talk about the haunted stuff, and because they think it's interesting. Now, a lot of folks, I don't think, are open as I am about it. But everybody comes to me, even people I'm surprised that seem like they're pretty hardcore, medical, scientific. They'll come up to me and be like, "Hey, I got this story, man." And I've heard about near-death experiences family members have had. I've heard about ghost experiences. So yeah, I've heard a mix of different things.
Dr. Van Lommel said something like, and again, I'm just kind of paraphrasing, but he was basically saying that a lot of colleagues are interested or maybe even believe it, but they won't say it publicly because they're worried about funding.
Right. So yeah, it depends what arena you're in. For me, I'm just all clinical. Right. So I just take care of patients. I'm not doing research stuff. But yeah, I can see where that could be a problem if you need to get funding for your projects and things like that. If you're doing academic research and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Even if you're gonna do academic research in parapsychology, like what they're doing, like Dr. Grayson and Dr. Tucker, it's hard to find the funding for it. In fact, I know with UVA, they kind of keep it under, it's not real well known that they have a parapsychology program. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it still kind of has a lot of, people worry about what kind of press they'll get from that kind of thing. But yeah, it could potentially, if you're like, talk about it a lot, they could, I guess, potentially make people question how scientific are you and all that kind of thing. So, although I don't know, when I think about that, I don't know if you're doing research like say blood pressure and you want to get funding. I don't know if you're into near-death experience. I don't know how much that would necessarily hurt you. Mm. I guess it just depends where you're at. I think some institutions and programs are probably more open to it. There's university-based, probably places that have parapsychology programs are going to be less worried about that versus some place that are pretty hardcore science and don't really buy into all that stuff. But for me, I'm lucky. I just do clinical. I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm interested in doing a project with some hospice patients. I've been thinking about it for a while now. I've been a little gun shy, partly because I don't want people to think I'm crazy. But I'd like to be present more like in a hospice unit when people are passing away, and just see if I could document the energy leaving the body with different equipment and things like that, or even just a camera. And, because where I work now, we have an inpatient hospice unit. So every time I work, I'm like, I'm going to go talk to them. And I kind of chicken out. I don't know why I chicken out, because I believe in what I do. And I believe in, the paranormal and parapsychology and all that. But you still worry about how's it going to come across if I walk over there and say, hey, can I do a study?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. And you have to... Who knows what management's going to think about that?
Well, that's the other problem too. Yeah.
And HIPAA laws and
yeah, there have to be a lot of control. I think that's one of the things that kind of makes me stop short.
Yeah.
Of it, but you never know, man. You might see me do a write-up.
I think it's amazing. I thought I've heard somebody that tried to do some type of research about that when passing, doing some kind of either measuring the weight of the body and saying when someone passes, it drops a few grams or something, or something along those lines.
Yeah, there was a guy who did that. There was a doc who did that back in the early 1900s or late 1800s, but the study wasn't very good. But the EK concluded that the soul weighed 21 grams. But I think he used like 9. He measured 9 people that passed before and after. But the way he did it wasn't very well done. but yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of repeat that study and see, or some way to either measure that, or, even just have, be able to have a camera present, and maybe some of the equipment we use when we paranormal investigate to kind of see if you can detect, does it detect any energy leaving the body kind of thing?
I was thinking this earlier when we were talking about this. I just wanted to throw this out there, and if you knew that or not, when we were talking about relationships. And one of my guests that does near-death experience research told me that the divorce rate, I think, is around 51% of near-death experiencers after they come back. Do you have any opinion?
Really?
Yeah.
The research I've been reading is that people that have been, so a near-death experience really seems to change people for the most part. They come back, with a whole new outlook on life and a more kind of positive, and, and they don't fear death. Actually, interestingly, a lot of folks come back and have psychic abilities or paranormal abilities, things they didn't have before, like, able to predict stuff, or, psychic types things. But the other thing is it seems to affect people in a way that it changes their life. So what they see is that people who are willing to put up with abusive relationships or bad relationships are like, I'm not going to do that anymore, because I realize there's so much more to life and there's so much better things out there that I'm not going to continue to stay in this relationship. So, and then they end up trying to find relationships that are better for them. So I could see that the divorce rate would creep up if you've been hanging out there in a bad relationship and you realize that there's so much better. But yeah, the research that I've been reading too says that people are more likely to leave bad relationships than to stay with it if they wouldn't have had their near-death experience, because they realize that there's so much love and so much, goodness out there and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess I would maybe add that some of them may come back and they've experienced so much love that maybe they'd be thinking, wow, I don't think my spouse loves me like the love I felt over there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, when you, right. In a lot of near-death experiences, love is one of the biggest things that comes through. People are like this all-encompassing love, so that's, love and peace, and, we're all the same. There's this, commonness among everybody. And people come back and they're like, I'm tired of this. Really, I'm not going to stay in this bad relationship anymore.
I was wondering this before, is that when you leave your body, is the reason that you experience so much happiness, it's like that you lose this kind of maybe or peace, is you lose like the psychochemical reactions of the body on the mind.
It does. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Because if you're in a lot of pain, or you're, or having different physical ailments or disease processes, it does affect your attitude and your way you think about things. People, especially people with chronic pain, they're miserable all the time, and it just becomes part of your attitude, and I guess your, who you are spiritually. So it seems like, once your essence or your consciousness leaves your body, where all that pain is, it seems like, you would be happier and not feeling all that yuckiness. So I think that's a possibility. I guess the other thing is that, a lot of people with near-death experiences report this, just that they experience God or a supreme being, and that supreme being emanates this or radiates this love, and that's where all that comes from too, this love and positive energy and all that. So it may be a combination of it's out there for us to experience once we're out of our bodies. But I also think it's not unreasonable to think that our bodies also cause us to feel unhappy or to feel, stressed out and things like that. So I think it's a good thought. So.
I was even thinking even subtle things, like, for example, how just different things like, how caffeine reacts on your body and can, some people will say caffeine can cause anxiety, just too much caffeine, or how alcohol affects your body and how that affects you psychologically. So maybe you're dropping all these other biochemical responses on the psyche or the consciousness.
Yeah, it's actually interesting when you think about it, because when you think about like little kids who haven't been exposed to all this stuff, like, they're so happy for the most part, when they're healthy and all that stuff, so happy, and they get that sparkle in their eye. Maybe that's what the closest we can get to what our consciousness is, when we're not in our bodies, is just that happy and joy of a kid who's not under the stress and not tobacco or not having the caffeine stuff and all that. The thing with caffeine and alcohol too is besides just the effects of the substances is the after. If you don't keep the caffeine in, you get caffeine withdrawal. Yeah. So that can be pretty bad. You start getting bad headaches and feeling yucky. If you drink all the time, you stop drinking, you get withdrawal. So it's not only is it just the substance while it's in you, but also if you start getting withdrawal from it. So, but yeah, when you think about little babies or kids that are still I always think about these little kids who are so happy and are running around full of energy that maybe that's a look at what our consciousness is when we're out of our bodies, once we pass away or whatever. So
yeah,
I used to talk on my Haunted MD page that as physicians and healthcare providers, we're kind of on both ends of the spectrum of the afterlife and even what I call the before life. Because, when you're coming into the world, you're born in. So, if you're thinking, well, the soul leaves when we die, it has to come in when we're born. So you feel like, when you're delivering babies and that kind of thing, you're at the beginning of the consciousness. And then when somebody passes away or has a near-death experience, you're witnessing that kind of end game kind of thing. So
are you thinking that the soul, the spirit is not there during pregnancy? It's at birth?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I know when they're born, or it's hard to say when the soul comes into, a baby, whether it's, when they're physically out of the body or while they're still in birth. That's hard to say for sure. At some point though, I feel like as doctors, we're there when it's, when life starts, and then we're there when it ends. So I feel like we're kind of there when the soul is born into the world and then when it leaves the world. So
yeah, I don't know either. I was just curious. I feel like it may be there at maybe at least at the end stages of pregnancy, but I could be, none of us really know unless,
Yeah, that's a tricky question, man. If we could figure that out.
Yeah. You would solve this whole abortion deal if you could figure that out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I need to switch gears with you because I'm running out of time, and I found you on YouTube, and I want to let everybody know about your YouTube channel. So what is that? So
my YouTube channel is, it's Don Molnar, Haunted MD. Mm-hmm. So that's my YouTube channel. And then I have, you want me to tell the other ones that I have too?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have a website or a Facebook page or Instagram or anything else that you connect with people on.
Yeah. Yes, I don't have a website right now, but I have a Facebook page. It's Haunted MD. And it's open to everybody. And was kind of where I started with my whole, where I branched off and decided to do all this other things that I'm doing now with the parapsychology and the paranormal investigating. So that's Haunted MD on Facebook. That's my primary page. And then I put stuff on YouTube. And then recently in the last year or so, I started Instagram. So my Instagram is Haunted. I think it's small H AUNTED, then a little line underneath it, then MD. So Haunted MD on Instagram. I don't have a web page yet. I started building it. I just got to finish building it.
What are your future plans? What are your future plans with all this paranormal activity you're into?
Well, I want to try, one of the things I like to try to do on the paranormal investigating side of things is see if there's a way to kind of validate some of the equipment we use. All this equipment we use for paranormal investigating has never really been officially proven to detect spirit energies. So somehow I like to come up with an idea where I can test that equipment in a setting where I could try to prove or disprove if we're picking up on spirit energy or not. So that's something I was working on. Like I mentioned about that study, working with hospice patients, if I could ever, pursue that. I am thinking about writing a book, Haunted MD book. I started writing that and need to kind of work on that some more. I think, after kind of doing this talk with you and then doing more research on near-death experiences, I think I'm going to be a little more proactive with the patients that I have, just kind of saying, hey, did anything happen? And try to, hear some of their stories and kind of see what they've been through. Some of the folks we get where I work, they've been really sick, and there's some of them are still on ventilators, and they've been to the death's door. Like some of them, they've been on essentially cardiopulmonary bypass to keep them alive. So they've been as close to death as you can get without dying. So try to be a little more open, maybe talking with folks at work and kind of just see where it goes, man. I keep doing some paranormal investigating. Eventually, it'd be nice to kind of bring together the ghost hunting world with a near-death academic world, and kind of see if we can kind of bring that together more.
Before I got into doing a lot of the NDE stuff on my podcast, I had all types of guests, and I was just kind of doing everything. And one of my guests was an author that wrote 20-something books. And I guess he maybe, perhaps I think he was trying to inspire me to write a book. But he said, if you just spend 15 minutes a day writing, in 15 minutes, you can come up with 500 words. And like in a month, that's all it is. He said 15 minutes a day, and I don't know what it was. In a month, you'll have a book or something. It's kind of what he told me.
It is easy to do that when you think about it. Mm-hmm. So in idealistically, yeah, but in reality, it seems hard to do that. I actually had a pretty good start. I got a pretty good start, and I kind of petered out on it. But I was reading this one book recently about how to write a book, and she made a point that if you look at all the stuff you put out on Facebook or YouTube, you probably have a book right there if you organize it. And I think about all the posts I do on my Haunted MD on Facebook, and I post all types of different things, about parapsychology and paranormal. But she made a good point that we put so much out there already, especially if you're doing a podcast. You got so much information out there, you could easily turn it into a book if you just, if you worked at it. So who was that guy? Was it Richard Estep?
No, I'd have to go through my podcast and look back on it. I'll look through if you like, and I'll email you who he was. I just can't remember off the top of my head. I'm at your number. Gosh, you're probably number 140 something, and he's probably back.
Good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, and he's probably back in the 30s or 40s. I'm guessing somewhere between 20 and 40. And he writes.
I know Rich.
He writes mystery.
Richard Estep. I know he writes a ton of books. Yeah.
I don't know him. This guy writes mystery books.
Oh, okay.
And that we were just, like I said, I was interviewing all kinds of people, and that's what we were talking about.
There's some cool near-death experience stories out there. Okay, I'll tell you just real fast. Mm-hmm. So this one is actually from Dr. Bruce Greisen, and I'm kind of paraphrasing and make it really short. There was this patient in the hospital. He had a nurse that was taking care of him. The nurse ended up leaving, and she was happy because she had a new car, was going to go on vacation. She leaves, goes off duty. For some reason, he ended up coding and dying temporarily, has a near-death experience. In his near-death experience, he sees the nurse, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" She's like, "I think I crashed my car. I crashed my car. Can you tell my parents that I'm really sorry?" And they bring him back to life, right? So he comes back to life and he tells his story, and here he finds out that the nurse really did crash her car, and she really had died, and she actually came to him in his near-death experience. Isn't that crazy? That's some crazy stuff right there.
That is amazing.
I know.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, anyways, that just popped in my head.
That's a great one. So do you have anything that you're working on that you want us to know about?
I think, like I mentioned, I hope to work on the book. Maybe see about talking with the hospice folks if they would be open to letting me do some kind of research like that. Otherwise, I just do some more podcasts later in the month or later in the next couple of months, and then I'm going to do some investigations as a COVID. It's tough right now to investigate with COVID and all that, especially being a physician. I hate to be too out there because it, looks bad. Right. Although I got my vaccination and all that. I'm vaccinated,
right,
and all that kind of stuff. But so yeah, hopefully as COVID gets better, we can start doing more investigations and all that kind of thing. So,
in your bio it says that you'd been on TV and on one of the haunted shows for the Travel Channel. Are you going to be on TV anymore?
I think if the opportunity came up, I would do those. Nothing for sure right now. The show I did was Haunted Hospitals on Travel Channel, and basically they were looking for stories from healthcare professionals, either in hospitals or nursing homes or some kind of healthcare setting. So I submitted my story, and they liked it. So they recorded. I went in and interviewed. So they interview you, and then they reenact it. So they have a reenactor kind of do the reenactment. So I think mine was season 12, Haunted Hospital Haunted Hospital season 2, episode 12. I'm like the last 15 minutes of it or so. And I basically shared some stories I had, as a doc in the hospital. And then they do reenactments of that. So they show little clips of me, then they show a reenactment with actors and all that stuff, and then back and forth like that. Now I had they had reached out to me about doing Haunted Hospitals 3, but that was like with the COVID and all that stuff. So it ended up being a shorter season, so I never did any of that. So I'm not sure if they would want more stories. I could potentially do that again. There's nothing definite though out there. It's a little tricky with the television. It's cool to be on TV, but I just got to be careful about mentioning where I work because it's a sensitive topic. Right. The hospital where I work and the health system doesn't want negative publicity. So I got to make sure that's not an issue. So it gets to be a little tricky,
right?
With that, but
wow, makes all sense. All right, before we wrap it up here, I wonder if you can give one last message to people because there's a lot of people that it's tough times with the COVID. There's a lot of depression out there, unhappiness. People are losing loved ones. And I think that's what are making quite a few people watch this podcast. So if there's anything inspirational you can give about NDEs and death in general, I think we'd all appreciate it.
Yeah. I believe there's an afterlife. When you look at these near-death experiences, I think there is an afterlife. And it seems to be a very happy, warm, inviting place. I think our relatives or deceased loved ones are waiting for us on the other side over there. So, I think it's important to realize if you lost loved ones, that I think they're, in a good place, and they're probably with you. I tell people all the time, that have lost somebody that I think they're still with you. They're still visiting. It may not be obvious, or sometimes it may be more obvious, but I think they're with us and they watch over us and all those kind of things. So I think there is, and then from the near-death experience side of things, I think for sure that supports an afterlife. From my ghost investigating and my paranormal, there seems to be, spirits or souls wandering here. I've caught really good pieces of evidence, audio evidence, and things on different cameras, and I've never caught a full body apparition. But from a paranormal investigating standpoint, I believe there's paranormal stuff out there. It's hard to explain, from a religious standpoint, but if you believe, near-death experiences, a soul leaves the body, or when we die, we leave the body, it makes sense. It kind of comes back around and wanders around. So I think from a scientific doctor standpoint, looking at near-death experiences, there's an afterlife. I think as a paranormal investigator, I've caught some pretty solid evidence that, spirits exist. So I think if it helps people to realize their loved ones are still with them and they're most likely in a better place. And, when it comes to COVID, I think we got to stay strong. This is not political, but wear your mask, social distance, get the vaccine. It's a real thing out there. I think it's going to start getting better, and hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be in a lot better spot. But I think we got to take it seriously and keep trying to do the right thing as much as possible.
Yeah, thank you for
and
that.
I'll say, from the COVID standpoint, I think if you're not in healthcare, I think it's hard to kind of appreciate how devastating it is. I end up taking care of people after COVID who are COVID negative, but they're still on the ventilator, still on dialysis. So it's devastating. You really don't want to get that sick with this illness. So it's real, and it's devastating, and it's hard on the families too, because they can't see their loved ones as much as they would like. And, and so it's just try to do the right thing and realize that if you have lost loved ones, I think they're still with us and they're in a better place.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Dr. Molnar. And I enjoyed having you on my podcast. Maybe we'll get you back, because we really didn't go over all the 12 steps or the 12 things of near-death experiences.
Yeah, sure.
But I enjoyed having you. And if I lived near you and you were in private practice, I would love to have you as my own personal physician, because I think you're great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So thanks again. And I wish you the best.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll be glad to come on anytime you want. So.
All right, great. Thanks again, and have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.